Welcome to Armor of Truth Live number 316. This one's called The Sneaky Public-Private Apocalypse in Your Hometown. It's there now, and it's much worse than the Who. Summer, say hello.
Greetings, everybody.
Here we are. Well, my friends, today we have a deep dive for you. It's probably something you haven't heard about. It's a mixture of public-private partnerships and government plans, but it's not coming from international organizations. It's coming from your federal government through NGOs, and it's being implemented right in your hometown. And this one specifically has to do with your schools and healthcare directly. You think the pandemic treaty was, that's going to come take your sovereignty? You need to pay attention to this because this is here now. It's not about sovereignty. It's about local autonomy. And before we get started with that, let's share this with you. We had put an article up. When was that? Yesterday? Day before yesterday? Within the past couple days.
Yes.
Right? And this is it. Should we celebrate the benign IHR amendments, international health regulations? And what we see in this article is we've made reference to Meryl Nass's COVID newsletter. And we dealt with some claims she had made before, and we think you should read this. I'll buzz through it here just so you can see what it's really about. She mentioned that it was that we should celebrate because we had dodged a big bullet. In fact, this was a huge win. You can see there at the bottom. That's a screen grab from her newsletter. She said the globalists got essentially nothing that was important to them. So, again, this was a huge win, she said. So it's a strange list. Some of the things on here seem to be kind of an arbitrary outline of popular alt media talking points. But then again, I read this article. It's not a long one, right? It's not one of the normal articles we put up that'll take you half an hour. This is just a few minutes of your time.
And I dropped the link in the chat.
Okay, good.
We'll also put it underneath the video for you guys.
Right on. Thank you for that. Just so you know, where this show is going to go today, the enemy is corporatism, as you'll see in the article here, through regional control of markets and social contouring. Social contouring, that's social engineering. That's reshaping the way you think. And it's being done through public-private partnerships, but also through distributive justice. This is where they bring the private world, your private life, out into the public. We'll help you understand what that means in just a moment. What the medical pharmaceutical industrial complex is building through the WHO is a controlled global market of profit-making. It's a profit-making leviathan, and it's built on the backs of taxpayers. How? Public-private partnerships, you'll see eventually when we get to that point. It's not sovereignty they're after. They intend to dominate markets so completely through patents and public-private partnerships that your options will be limited to only their products and treatments. Now, that said, you can inspect the post that Dr. Nass made, and you can check and see if you think those points are relevant or not. But we're seeing confusion, and we're seeing divisions that are erupting among the, I don't know what we call this. What do we call this community? The alt media and the patriot community. The truth community. In other words, all of us who want to see the WHO and the UN out of our lives and out of our business. Those of us who value personal autonomy and, national sovereignty. Of course, we want to see these threats done away with. Let me show you a couple things here that were, I think, troublesome. These were comments that were under the post Dr. Nass made. This is the June 1st post. You'll see the link in our post. But as you can see here, I'm not going to read it all, but I'll read some of it. First commenter says, Meryl Nash, you've been a true blessing and a driving force in stopping the WHO. Now remember, Dr. Nash just told her readers that this is a big win. We should be celebrating. You've been a monumental positive influence on many people and gave them renewed vigor. It goes on down. Let's see. Much love to you and everyone else who is genuinely working for the greatest benefit of all. You are all true, virtuous human beings. You inspire me each day to spend energy thinking of ways. So, it's very supportive. Dr. Nass liked that post. Next commenter, very well put. Meryl is 1 in a million, an angel of all things good. God bless you, Meryl. You're truly our Esther, and we so appreciate you. And then it takes a turn. And this is where we want to really pay attention. This commenter says, but why does James Roguski write that we, the people, have been massively defeated on the IHR? And then Dr. Nash responds with, great question. Did he not read them? What is his intention? Interesting. Now this was what caused me to want to write this whole article. This exchange here. And some other information that, we heard privately that we didn't bring into the public because it's private information, right? We don't mix the public and the private like the New World Order is, but, So you can see the commenters after that are kind of, yeah, that's right. That's my question too. This kind of thing makes me doubt, this commenter says. Excuse me there. And so this next commenter asks Dr. Nass, now if you would, please list your interpretation of what was adopted. You notice the list that Dr. Nass gave really didn't have anything to do necessarily with the IHR. Again, it looked like list of talking points. Next commenter says, Dr. Nass has worked extremely hard, so why don't you do that? In other words, stop questioning our leader. And you can see how the comments go from there. It devolves into a bit of a back and forth. So this is just a sampling of the comments, and it represents a general emerging trend, not just here, but in lots of places out here. We're in this, keeping an eye on this stuff every day, and we're looking at a lot of other platforms and content creators. Dr. Nass is not alone in this. Like many who've chosen to come forward as captains of the Citizens Brigade to confront our global adversaries, she's placed herself in a difficult position, a position that requires an even-handed, magnanimous approach to disagreement and a comforting style of reassurance in times of confusion. Now, we all make mistakes, but if we're serious about running a successful defense of our liberties, this is an example of what not to do. And so we use these comments as context and a couple posts that Dr. Nass has put up. And again, let me just be clear so that let me give Dr. Nass her credit. For example, the circumstances and experiences of the global pandemic and the vaccine rollout, with all its coercions and loss of livelihoods and even loss of life itself, were most certainly traumatic. Dr. Meryl Nass emerged as a prominent figure standing against medical tyranny. Many people around the world, seeking hope and strength in the storm, rallied around Dr. Nass's resilience to personal and professional persecution as a source of strength and reassurance that there was indeed a resistance to this overt and arrogant power play, and also the psychological operations. So we have no reason to doubt that Dr. Nass's intentions have been anything but good. We're not making any claims like that. We're just pointing out here. This essay on the second half of this Substack article is about leadership and what we believe is good leadership and what we believe is not good leadership. So I won't share all this here. I want you to prefer that you read it because we think this is what's needed. If we're going to take it seriously, if we're going to mount a true pushback to global tyranny, we're going to have leaders who do this and don't do these other things. All right, so this is our contribution to the movement now because we believe there's a big problem as far as leadership goes.
Yes, I've got one of the slides up from the article. It says when those in positions of leadership are careless with their authority and allow group dynamics to run amok, the most common and worst result is that truth is inevitably suppressed, whether it was intended to or not.
That's right. Well, the landscape of journalism and media over the decades, this is no surprise to all you watching or listening to this. It shifted from being a bastion of truth-seeking to a social engineering tool. All right, relevance has taken precedence over truth. The alt media has experienced exactly the same shift, especially over maybe the last couple years especially. The shadow has become the substance. In other words, just like the mainstream media, the alt media is obsessed with what Daniel Boorstin calls pseudo-events. Pseudo-events. Events orchestrated purely for the sake of media coverage. Now, Boorstin was talking about in the context of the mainstream media. I'm applying this to the alt media. The alt media is obsessed with pseudo-events, where the shadow becomes the substance. Let me explain. Pseudo-events overshadow reality, and they create an alternate reality where the memes and the hype around actual events become more significant than the actual events. In other words, the story, the real event, takes on a whole new meaning. So in the mainstream media, news is often manufactured. No surprise here, right? Press conferences, staged photo ops, orchestrated scandals, things like this dominate the headlines. And what that does is it pushes aside substantive issues. Things that require in-depth reporting, things that require careful critical thinking are not dealt with. The rise of the 24/7 news cycle, and of course social media, this all fuels the trend. And therefore, the demand for constant content drives the creation of news stories rather than a commitment to reporting on the reality of the event. Reporters serve this need for content. The alt media now does exactly the same thing. Events are meticulously planned to generate buzz, and the spectacle of the coverage itself overshadows the substance or the real event. Now, where the mainstream media is concerned, this has led to an underinformed citizenry that knows more about the candidates' private affairs than they know about the Constitution or their own local government. The alt media, once again, has done the same thing. Now, let me just give you an example here. The early Americans, not necessarily the founders for sure, but the people. We the people. These early Americans, they fought for tyranny without the need for a constant flow of information. Americans today, on the other hand, are overstimulated and overinformed and far less astute. There is a big difference between acquiring and accumulating information and having knowledge. We crave more information. Just tell me the newest thing. What's the newest bid on Hunter Biden? What's the newest bid on Trump's court cases? In a society saturated with information coming from every angle, the distinction between reality and symbolic information becomes blurred. Simulations of reality become more real than reality itself. In other words, People want the symbols rather than the reality. They want the hype. They want what's relevant, not the truth. And there are any number of fakes, frauds, and grifters out there ready to serve it up. Now, regarding Jean Baudrillard's theory of the hyperreal, people want to consume fresh narratives. So the media and the alt media cook up fresh narratives, and the people eagerly consume them with little discernment. If it tastes good, it must be true. The mainstream media and the alt media do not report the truth. Now, when I say the alt media, obviously, I don't mean everybody. I'm talking about a trend that we're seeing. And that trend is exhibited in this article that we've put up for you here, where we see a prominent figure in this movement giving bad information. And not only that, we see this prominent figure in this movement also engaging in creating divisions, encouraging divisions among her own group. Now, some may say, well, she's not the alt media. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, she is, right? Alt media, the term means it's not a platform. It's, it's voices, it's truth tellers, it qualifies, all right? And it's an example of what we see going on. But anyway, as the mainstream and alt media are choosing to not report the truth, they mix up and serve fresh narratives, right? Narratives that please the algorithms, narratives that attract their target audience. Rather than digging into the topics, reading and absorbing knowledge, and chasing down the story to find the truth, a fresh narrative will do. Just give me something new. Mainstream media outlets release a new story every hour. You can see, like, what is it? Some of the one in India, that news.
WION.
WION, right? They got a new video coming out like every hour. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you see a couple dozen news stories a day, and that's pretty common. Not only that, we covered Dr. Steve Turley, right? He's a prominent figure in the alt media patriot movement. Million subscribers, I believe it is. Dr. Steve Turley puts out 2 or 3 or more videos every day that are shaped to fit his target audience's cravings for fresh dope. Join the Patriots. Be a freedom fighter. Wear our hat. Buy our t-shirt. But by all means, click the like button and support this work. How much truth can one man track down in one day? Is it really truth? Or is it just regurgitated narrative from some other so-called patriot or truther? Even when these personalities have the best intentions, what ends up happening is that a false reality is constructed in the minds of the viewers or the readers. An acceptable perception of reality is offered up, like a pepperoni pizza, mangia. Public perception is formed. If it tastes good, it must be true. But is it real? How would you know? Whenever asked online, we ran a poll question like this a couple years ago. And recently, I saw this in the comments under the post we were talking about too. When asked, why haven't you read the pandemic agreement document? Why haven't you read the International Health Regulation Amendments? Why haven't you read the Sustainable Development Goals for yourself? Most common response, I don't have the time. Right? Well, it's harmless, right? I mean, the alt media is on our side. We can trust the guys on Rumble. What it causes is a mass of American conservatives who need to be focused, who need to know the issues. It causes us to get into a situation where we can't discern what's real from what's being fabricated. If you're going to vote for Trump, vote for him because you understand his policy positions, because you know his worldview, and because you came to those conclusions on your own through due diligence. Don't follow the crowd because they have the best and coolest slogans and the largest crowds. If that's your method for deciding who is the best candidate, then we have no hope. Just as sensationalist mainstream media reporting can create a perception, for example, maybe that a certain ethnicity is shot more by police officers than any other ethnicity. That's reported a lot, right? Even when the statistical evidence does not support the claim, they report it because that serves the narrative. They're repeating narratives. The alt media has begun to do the same thing. The alt media is also constructing false realities by recycling narratives and shaping public opinion, often to the detriment of other conservatives and Christians. Here's some examples. One of Saul Alinsky's rules for radicals is to pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, polarize it, a tactic used to control narratives and manipulate public opinion. Now, the alt media does the same thing. Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, or any of the prosecutors or attorneys that have been prosecuting Trump. I'm not saying don't report on it, but do you see how people are reporting on it? Is anybody seeking unity in the way they report on these things? On the one hand, the legal system and the media have been weaponized against the people. On the other hand, the alt media, which grew out of a movement to counter the false narratives of the mainstream media, has weaponized itself against its own people by following the same tactics and serving a specific agenda unquestioningly. And the way we do this is by creating public villains and heroes and then capitalizing on the drama, oversimplifying complex issues into polarizing conflicts, fresh narratives. That's a tactic that not only drives clicks, engagement, and viewership and donations, but it also diverts attention away from the real issues that require nuanced understanding, careful thought, and long-term solutions. Dumbing down the public discourse is not an effective method for fighting tyranny. Edward Bernays believed that the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an essential element in democratic society. That's social engineering. So, content creator, are you a tool for influence or are you a truth teller? Are you a genuine investigator? Are you a student of your subject? Do you care about your viewers and readers? Or do you want recognition? Strategically shaping public perceptions and attitudes to grow your brand and to expand your influence or expand your YouTube channel or whatever. That turns your reporting into just another tool for social engineering. Think of it like this. After the Deepwater Horizon oil spill, for example, BP launched a massive public relations campaign to restore its image. How did they do it? They focused on everything that they were doing to clean up the spill and to prevent future incidents. And that shifted all of the attention away from the thing we really needed to be talking about, the disaster. Content creator, truther, patriot. Are you telling your viewers and readers what they want to hear? Are you telling them to celebrate a great victory in the fight so you can be the hero? Are you fear-mongering them so they'll have to depend on your reports to stay informed and stay safe? We all play a role in forming the attitudes of our viewers and readers, and we all deal in propaganda one way or another every day. I'm talking about content creators now. And even the viewers and listeners in the comments, you can see it. Jacques Ellul said, modern propaganda is not just about overt political messages or meant to steer the masses. It is actually embedded in every aspect of societal communication. And it subtly shapes perceptions and beliefs. That's why we have to be so careful to be vigilant and aware of what we're doing, what we're saying, who we're listening to, what are we repeating. People are continuously bombarded today with messages that reinforce the status quo or perhaps call for revolution. Messages that tell them the people are going to defeat the globalists or tell them that humanity is a cancer on the earth and must be culled. Algorithms curate these messages and send them out. Fresh narratives to reinforce the user's presuppositions and preferences, creating echo chambers that reduce critical engagement, that encourage passive acceptance of dominant narratives. What's the answer, you might say? Content creator, challenge your viewers, challenge your readers. Don't always tell them what you know they want to hear. Don't play up to the algorithm. Tell them what they must know. Tell them the truth at all costs, even if it costs you some subscribers. Don't contribute to the fragmentation of our society by focusing on sensationalism, by being polarizing. Don't be just another tool for social engineering, because the stakes are too high and the consequences are far too severe. And unless you're an entertainer, stop trying to entertain your viewers. Stop trying to be relevant. Commit to not only informing, but educating your viewers, your readers, those who support you. This erosion of integrity has undermined our whole nation's system of government from the local level up. And uninformed, see that what I just said there, a lot of people like to blame it's the federal government, it's the New World Order. No, it's your fault. It's our fault. We're the ones who stopped paying attention. An uninformed or misinformed public cannot make sound decisions. Turn your viewers' attention toward their local governments where they can and must make a direct difference. Help your viewers, help your readers engage with reality. Help them to think critically through these things. Advocate for integrity in the mainstream media and advocate for integrity in the alt media. And for you folks who are viewers and readers of our work and other people's work, if you're a viewer, if you're a consumer of this kind of content, hold these podcasters and bloggers, hold us all accountable for what we say to you. And make sure to support independent voices, reporters who prioritize truth over relevance, truth over sensationalism. Only then can the alt media fulfill its role as a counter to the false narratives of the mainstream media. Only then can we play an effective role in reestablishing the fourth estate, to hold the powerful accountable and to inform the public, to inform you in a meaningful way. To counter this political and media warfare, we have to educate the public on how these media representations can manipulate perceptions. We have to encourage critical thinking about how information is presented. We must also develop analytical tools and frameworks that help viewers and readers understand the motivations behind media narratives. Focus on sharing authentic stories that you have personally vetted, and work vigilantly to cut through the hyperreal to get down to the real, so you can reveal the underlying realities to your viewers. And so that's what we want to give you today, an example of this. How to do this in our article, which here it is. This article titled, "Should We Celebrate the Benign IHR Amendments, Groupthink and Weak Leadership in the Alt Media and Patriot Movement." We encourage you to read this. The second part, the last part of the article is an essay titled "Groupthink and Weak Leadership in the Alt Media and Patriot Movement." It is a It's an essay on leadership, effective leadership, what it looks like and what it doesn't look like. It's a solution. It's a solution to a problem that we've detected. And honestly, a problem that we see in ourselves. It's hard to talk about these things every day and not engage in the propaganda sometimes. We have to be willing and able to look for it, identify it, and see it in ourselves. Now, let's see. Have you got a graphic on our? I got another bit here to introduce this. So you have a graphic for the federal plan or something like that? Sure. Sorry. Go ahead. There you go.
Yes, I sure do.
All right.
Let me pop it up there.
All right. So let's get started on our topic for today. Let me start off by playing this clip from Lisa Logan. Lisa Logan is a researcher who we discovered through James Lindsay's work. And she has, she's just like you. She's just like us. She's someone who has found this information and has broken through the hyperreal, gotten down to the truth. Let's see. Well, I had it. Let me get it here. Just bear with me for a second. I've got it. There's a 2-minute clip that's a really good introduction.
The federal plan for equitable.
But I want to get it up where folks can see it. Here we go. Okay. Here you go. Check this little introduction out.
The federal plan for equitable long-term.
I still don't have it on the screen, do I?
I see a video up there, but it looks black.
I got it.
There we go.
Recovery and resilience, also called.
Let me start. It's called the Federal Plan for Recovery and Resilience, right? This is that sneaky plan. Equitable long-term recovery and resilience. There's some terminology you need to be aware of here. Resilience is a synonym of social credit. All right, so keep that in mind as she gives you this introduction.
The Federal Plan for Equitable Long-Term Recovery and Resilience, also called ELTRR or the Federal Plan, is supposedly infusing federal funding into communities hit hard by the pandemic to make them more resilient against future disasters. Under this pretext, radical policy changes will be expected in these local economies to foster what they call resilience. Changes not just in health, but in education, housing, employment, transportation, food, water, justice, climate, etc. The recommendations instituted through the federal plan will affect what children will be taught in school, because it'll teach them to think like a communist, how communities are planned and budgeted, giving preferential treatment based on skin color, how much water can be used and what kind of food can be purchased, decided by equity and sustainability, and more. Measuring resilience will require collecting invasive amounts of data on children, adults, businesses, and other entities, which will be gathered and evaluated, tracked through indices like these, and then scored and judged based upon whether or not their behavior is contributing to the resilience or health of their communities. Social credit system ahoy! Essentially, the federal plan and its vital conditions framework are being used as a backdoor way of implementing the totalitarian targets of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs.
There you go. There's the main point. This is a backdoor plan to get the SDGs into your hometown. So do you understand what's happening here? What this means?
It's a collaboration of national and regional governments.
That's right. This is what regionalism looks like. Do we have a definition of regionalism? I can get it up here on our Substack article if we need to, but I think it's a good time to do a definition of regionalism. If you had one on hand, but I can get it here to our article if I can. I've got too many buttons to click these days. Okay. So if you go to the Armor of Truth Substack and you go down here, there it is, regionalism. Summer has got us taken care of here on the Substack. These things are easy to find, so thank you, Sam. We appreciate that. I appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Okay, regionalism. The threat is not to national sovereignty. The threat is to your local autonomy, your local government's autonomy. All right, so let's see. Regionalism is often presented as this pragmatic, practical solution to all the challenges of the world, to climate change, to overpopulation, to whatever the threat of the day might be. Economic stability. However, regionalization, as it is being implemented by these powerful Western interests, is the intermediate step between nationalism and globalism. So it's a step-by-step transfer of power that starts locally. It starts locally. Remember, this thing is growing up from. You don't see it. So there's a maxim that revolutions are never grassroots. They're always top down from some hidden hand. This is the opposite. This is an anti-revolution. In other words, through public-private partnerships, regionalism is being implemented right in your backyard, right now, and nobody knows it. You see, a revolution is overt. Regionalism is covert. All right. Now let me set all this up with a bit of a, how should I say? Well, let me set this up by telling you something about free markets and socialism. In a free society and in free markets, the human rights of individuals are acknowledged, respected, and secured. Every person has an equal opportunity to achieve and is personally responsible for his own prosperity. In a collectivist society, rights are understood in terms of the community. Individual rights and opportunities are balanced, which means limited or restricted, against some measure of equity. That measure of equity could be income, health care, as you saw in the video. It could be education, employment, housing, transportation, justice, social justice. That's a measure of equity. So to achieve this level of equity, certain individuals must receive preferential treatment. In fact, it's not even that. It's that a certain segment of the society must be discriminated against until equity is achieved. And so in their ideal expressions, the individual has an equal opportunity to prosper in a free society and free markets, and justice is blind. That means it's applied equally. In a communitarian society, we'll just use that term. That's the blending of communism and fascism. You'll hear it in the work today. They call it communofascism. We call it communitarianism, or you could call it something else, but that's the term Rosa Koire has used for this, and I think it fits fairly well. But in this type of system that you're going to hear about today, there is no equality. Equity and equality are not the same thing. In this kind of a system, there are only subjective measures of social equity. This is why concepts like justice are qualified as social justice, because it's not real justice, it's distributive justice. Some people get justice, some people get discrimination until everyone's equal, until equity is achieved. Excuse me. The measure of equity is also, whatever that is, whether it's justice or housing or health care or education, this measure of equity is used as a pretext for circumventing constitutional rights and the rule of law and due process. And the purpose is, pay attention to this point. I'll show you right here. Circumventing constitutional rights means going around, avoiding constitutional rights, avoiding the rule of law, avoiding due process to directly discriminate against a particular group of people. Tactics include influencing law through paid activism, lobbying, coercion, and shaming of all dissent, all of which are justified by the concept of achieving some arbitrary measure of equity. All right, in short, to achieve equity, one group within society must be discriminated against. That is what the whole social justice movement is about. If you've heard the term anti-racism or anti-racist, that's what it means, as you can see on your screen here. This is a quote. I've just recently read through all of Ibram X. Kendi's book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. And I thought I understood pretty well what it meant, but I was shocked myself when I read it in his own words. Here's an example. In the book, it says this word for word: the only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. The only remedy to present discrimination is future discrimination. Now you can see he actually posted that quote from his book on Twitter, and it caused such a firestorm that he kind of tried to soften the language, but it's preserved in the book in that first sense. So let me set this up this way. Hannah Arendt, sociologist, philosopher, wrote that totalitarianism is a process that includes isolating and atomizing people. Because the early goal in a totalitarian tiptoe, David Icke gets credit there, the early goal in the process is to create a sense of loneliness in the people that will lead to a sense of angst, and that the state will come in and solve it. Do you remember lockdowns? Think lockdowns. Think economic collapse. Think loss of small businesses. Think loss of routine and structure. Loss of purpose. This creates a sense of loneliness and anxiety. Totalitarian ideology creates a rallying point for these lonely people by identifying one certain group who is the problem. Perhaps it's a particular class within society. They become the scapegoat on which the blame is laid. This group becomes the common enemy of peace and safety. This group becomes the common enemy of the world, of the globe itself. Throughout history, we see occasions when the Jews, as an example, were used as this rallying point, were used as this scapegoat. As they became financially and politically prosperous, they were demonized and identified as racist, elitist, and as the root cause of every social ill and national problem. Now, let me step back for a minute. Let's not get lost in the weeds here about whether or not they were those things. Let's focus on the point at hand here, right? Where a group in society is singled out for extinction. Another example, during the French Revolution, the aristocracy was identified as the common enemy of flourishing. The church was identified as the common enemy of flourishing. Now, in all these cases, the culmination, or in this, particularly here in the, for the Jews and also for the French Revolution, the culmination was mass murder and a collapse of peace and safety in the name of solving the problem of inequality. Likewise, the idea of the nation state was seen as a tool of the oppressor class, and the idea of global order was posited as the answer to this oppression. Right? That's the United Nations. That's what the United Nations was created for. The obvious danger here is the emergence of a personality, a singular personality that will gain popularity because he represents the voice and the will of the people and promises to restore the balance of power. That was Adolf Hitler in Germany in the early 30s. Do you see anything happening in our nation right now that might seem a little like that? That's why we have to be very careful about how we allow our emotions to be caught up. Today in the West, we're seeing this pattern and tactic play out in real time as one particular group within Western civilization is being singled out, is not protected, right? They're being identified and demonized in much the same way that we've seen it historically play out. What is the social problem? And who is that group they have identified to single out? Well, they've identified the problem as an immoral inequality that must be addressed directly. An immoral inequality, an immoral inequity that has to be addressed directly. Today, it's common to hear from the spokesman of the left or the woke movement, and it's common to hear it repeated by those who've been mesmerized by the message of the oppressor and the oppressed paradigm, that theirs is a righteous movement for equality and to raise vulnerable groups who the immoral common enemy has left behind. That's what they say their goal is. Their openly stated goal is simply to foster a society of equal opportunity for all, to raise those who've been left behind, and to protect the earth from the effects of the actions of this common enemy. This has all the hallmarks of a totalitarian movement organized from within the United Nations world mind, as Robert Mueller referred to it. The World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and many other Geneva-based international organizations advocate social, financial, and environmental policies with a very specific ideology of solidarity attached to it. And that ideology is designed to take down whoever this common enemy is. So the ideology is then spread regionally. It doesn't come directly down from the UN. It's implemented regionally by non-governmental organizations, agencies, and activists at the local level, where it's implemented and ultimately enforced by your government, by your national, state, and local governments. So who's this common enemy? Summer, do you have any idea? Who's the enemy? Who's this enemy they've identified?
It's coming from in the house, as we've said.
The call is coming from inside.
Our government, our local officials that have bought into this.
Well, let me put a specific point on it here. The common enemy that we're talking about here, that the totalitarian ideology has singled out that must be discriminated against, is white Christian capitalism. Americans, in other words. Americans have become that rallying point, that root cause of global suffering. Therefore, the structures and institutions of American freedom and prosperity must be torn down. So while we're busy celebrating our win against the World Health Assembly, this is what's happening right now in your city council. And you can see this throughout the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, this is the thing you need to pay attention to, because these are the things that are being implemented right in your backyard while we're all busy celebrating our victory over globalism. The SDGs and specific policies and movements are intended to fundamentally change America. At the heart of the attack is the push to subvert individual responsibility and replace it with collectivism, to dismantle free market capitalism and replace it with a command economy. That was the foundation of 20th century communism. But it's just a far-right conspiracy, Summer. That's just a far-right conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. It's nothing more. You guys you're just repeating narratives. What's the evidence? Someone might say. Well, if it's still unclear to you, let us now explain for you where the most immediate threat to your way of life and liberties comes from. Where's the call coming from, Summer?
Inside the house.
All right. So let's get into the article now. Resilience is being used as a pretext for a global agenda. All right, let me catch up with myself here because I'm a little bit discombobulated.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention is a rule that we came to know recently. A rule everyone should have in your head is that communists share your vocabulary, but they don't share your dictionary. They use the same words as you do, but they don't mean the same thing by those words. So inclusion is not inclusive. Words are used to deceive you, lawfare. They actively engage in mystification, like they use code, truly. You may have noticed diversity doesn't have a whole lot of diversity of political opinion, for example. So just to keep this in mind as we head into this article.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's a good setup there. Let's jump in on this piece right here.
Tyler Norris, Monty Roulier, and Bobby Milstein, because they were my partners in crime in those early days when I picked up the phone.
This is Lisa Logan talking here. This is her video. It's on Parents of Patriots. That's the YouTube channel called Parents of Patriots. Should definitely check it out. This is good information. She's not involved in all kinds of other ideas and theories. She's not an alt media personality. She's become, and there's a lot of other people involved here. She's just the one who put the article together. And Alex Newman put it up right on
Liberty Sentinel.
Liberty Sentinel.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got that link in the description or in the chat now too. And so that's who you hear speaking.
March of 2020 and said, we need help. This is bigger than government. And they answered the call and led so many of you on this call and many who aren't with us through the exercise to develop the springboard. A lot gets said about what this moment calls for. It was certainly a moment when I picked up the phone and called Monty, Tyler, and Bobby. And I think that is really poignant to think about. There are multiple moments that happen over time when there is a leadership call for stewards to join together and affect change. We started the ELTRR, that interagency.
Yeah, so let me correct. This is not Lisa talking. This is the other side talking here. They're talking about why they came up with this plan in 2020, this plan for resilience, right? To give you another idea here, because we can't go through all of the video today, but what you learn in this is, you've heard of critical race theory. Specifically, this plan is for the schools, being done in the schools. And then we're going to show you how it's already been implemented in healthcare, regionally, all around you now. But here, the critical race theory is not called critical race theory anymore. Now you have to pay attention for the term social emotional learning, or SEL. So you might hear that term come up. That's one of the ways that they're pushing for equity, social emotional learning. That means the children who come from privilege have to be discriminated against. They can't receive all of the advantages, or let me just let these people explain it to you.
Work group, in a moment when we were reflecting on what we were seeing across the country. In many communities, the failed systems were falling apart before a virus arrived. It was not COVID that was causing the inequities that were flooding our communities. It was the recognition that there were decades of failure on the part of government, civil society, and many other leaders across.
This failure they're talking about here is inequity. It's an inequity in outcomes. Not everybody is ending up in the same place, and they say that's bad.
Sectors to invest in the kinds of things that we knew would have produced equitable well-being and resilience.
All right, there's the first term, well-being. So what we've decided to do for you in this show is to drill down on a couple of these really important points to show you how regionalism is working. And a broader concept here is Well-Being
Economy Alliance. So I'm showing the people the website right now. The Well-Being Economy Governments Partnership, it's called WeGo, is a collaboration of national and regional governments interested in sharing expertise and transferable policy practices to advance their shared ambition of building well-being economies. Membership of the group has grown organically since its launch in 2018 and currently involves the governments of Scotland, Iceland, New Zealand, Wales, Finland, with Canada actively participating. So think about what's been going on in those respective countries and kind of explains a lot, right?
Yeah.
How the leaders have been acting.
Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, so let's go here. Let's listen to this clip. She's going to talk about what we just set up for you: free market versus command economy, and then it's going to, in about a minute and a half, it gets into WeGo's, which is well-being economy and governments. Right.
That's right.
Yeah, WeGo's. You'll see it.
Progress that they say are more meaningful than stock prices or gross domestic product. What do they mean by this? Well, currently, GDP, or gross domestic product, a monetary measure of the market value of all the final goods and services produced in a specific time period by a state or country as a whole, is used to determine how fast economies are growing and how they compare to other economies. This is also being used to reflect the economic well-being of households by arguing that when households have more wealth, they tend to have a better standard of living because greater wealth can mean greater access to things that can improve daily life. Households that have increased purchasing power then drive the free market, creating demand for those goods and services which they believe will make them better off. America has a type of free market economy like this, where businesses are privately owned and the law of supply and demand, rather than a central planner like a government entity, regulates the production of goods and services and the cost of labor for their workers. This is in stark contrast to a command economy like communism, in which a central government authority dictates the levels of production that are permissible and the prices that may be charged for goods and services, as well as their, according to them, fair distribution. So how does the federal plan's vision of a well-being economy differ from either of these? Well, first off, a well-being economy, like they're saying in the springboard America should become like, would ensure that fair distribution wouldn't be fair or even. They'd like us to join countries like New Zealand, who have a well-being budget and who are part of the Well-Being Economy Alliance and belong to something that the alliance created called Well-Being Economy Governments, of which there are now 6. You can see here that one of the commitments that members of the Well-Being Economy Governments make is progress toward the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This slide contains an excerpt of a document about New Zealand's well-being budget. Instead of putting their budget toward efforts that are focused on growing their financial economic stability or resilience, New Zealand is prioritizing well-being at the center of all their financial decisions. New Zealand came up with their Living Standards Framework, which preferences investments in the Maori and Pacific communities, which they say have been historically marginalized and don't have as much well-being as the rest of New Zealanders. Sound familiar to the narrative in the U.S.? Additionally, they're focusing on a transformation of their economy to deal with excess greenhouse gas emissions, among other initiatives like focusing on mental health, health equity, housing, and various other changes that sound a whole lot like the recommendations also found in the federal plan.
So keep in mind here, what's going on. Apologize for the audio. It's just a bit low.
Yeah, it's low.
And I may try to pump it up here, but I'll have to be careful to bring it back down because it's going to bring all the audio up. But anyway, as you've heard here, they're bringing the private out into the public. What we mean by that is things that are typically talked about in private, are now part of public policy. Feelings, for example. Feelings don't really have any place being managed by government. That can only lead to problems. Okay, so I'll play it. I'm going to try to pop up the volume a little bit.
For the first time ever, the ministers and departments in New Zealand now have to submit budget bids that lay out how they plan to use the funding they receive to achieve the well-being priorities the government set forth in their budget. Priorities which ultimately are just reframings of the UN's, World Health Organization's, and World Economic Forum agendas. In this video on health promotion for well-being, equity, and sustainable development from the World Health Organization, you can see how the pandemic is being used as a catalyst for these types of huge economic shifts.
It's taken a pandemic to help us realize just how sick our world has become. We've been slaves to materialism, building our personal empires and countries' economies. We convinced ourselves that life was great. We ignored the cost to ourselves, other people, and our planet. When COVID-19 arrived, it forced us to stop. We had time to question our way of life. If we had done things differently, could we have been better prepared? We've realized we can't go on as before. How can we say our economies are thriving when the cost to our societies is so high? There is a way out of this, and we all have a part to play. Countries should be measuring their success by the well-being of their people and the environment they live in.
Stop right there. Countries should be measuring their success by the well-being of their people. That is a completely subjective measure. Remember earlier, I was telling you that these are measures of equity. It's not equality. It doesn't have anything to do with gross domestic product. It's a subjective measure of equity.
Not just by deals and trade, or profits made on products that are threatening our world and our own survival. We need to stop pursuing the same old self-destructive priorities and create conditions for people to live better lives. Health should be factored into everything, both globally and locally.
Health should be factored in everything. That's probably a good place for us to dive into what you have for us. Okay, so you heard that point there. Health should be factored in to everything. Now, we've been telling you, your threat is not the WHO, it's not the UN. It is their policies, but they're not the ones implementing them. They won't be the ones enforcing them. It will be your own neighbors. All right, Summer, show us how that works. Do you want to start off with Atrium, or do you want to start off?
Sure.
Let's start off with Atrium. Tell us what Atrium is, and I'll just, it's an example of a regional medical conglomerate.
That's right, a regionalization effort. So you can see how Atrium Health basically took over and owns several states now worth of medical facilities. I believe it's 40 different hospitals, over 1,000 different locations, clinics. And what I'm showing you right now on the screen is I wanted to let you know that they've got, of course, very proudly about diversity, equity, and inclusion at Atrium Health. And so this is what it looks like. And we're going to click on in here. We've got the representative. We're going into the diversity and social impact report. All right.
Just pay attention, folks. Remember, health should be, what did she just say? Health should be factored into everything.
Well, yeah, we've talked a lot about the One Health program. So, you know, they want to be able to track humans and plants and the environments for your health and safety, right? That's the promise. That's what they're trying to sell you. But as you know, that's about so much more. And also it includes how you think about things as well. So how you think matters.
Let me jump in right quick, just
Surely.
for a second, because right here I want to show you. In the article that we were critiquing, that we were criticizing from Dr. Nass, she was telling her viewers, she was telling her readers, her followers, that we dodged big major bullets when the IHR were adopted. And right here, One Health is gone. Well, is that true, Summer?
Absolutely not.
Okay, why is that not true?
Well, we can see it right here.
It's being done at the local level or through the region, through these regional conglomerates, right?
Right. Exactly. Right. So, you know, all you have to do is, and we will provide all of these research links so you can check it out if you feel like it. But, you know, I came across this just inadvertently. I was actually like thinking about going to the doctor and didn't want to go to the one that I had been going to, and thought, okay, let me look into getting into possibly a place that is just privately owned or whatnot, and talked with insurance, and then I happened upon this conglomerate here. And like I said, it's regional. It's several states that it's overseeing, and this is an example of the medical industrial complex and how big it is. And it really thinks that it wants to also get involved in not just diversity, equity, and inclusion and your health and all sorts of invasive things about your health, but also about the environment. So this company as well, this conglomerate, this medical industrial complex in the Southeast region, it wants to it has no borders. It has no boundaries. It's data collecting. It really is like the centralized system. It's the beginnings thereof. And it's quite scary. It's also talking about being carbon neutral as well. So I'm going to back out from this right here.
Okay. So the point here, folks, is all of these measures, item points from the IHR and the pandemic treaty. Remember, folks, they're not interested in your sovereignty. All of these things will be the pandemic treaty or the IHR. They are exercises in sovereignty because ultimately it'll be your own government and especially your local government and these regional conglomerates are the ones implementing it and putting it into practice. Specifically today, we're showing you what it looks like a medical conglomerate.
Yes.
And also...
Well, so I just wanted to show them as well so they could see, here's Atrium again. You've got on their website proudly the environmental sustainability section, and the president and CEO of Atrium saying one lesson we learned during COVID-19 pandemics is that health systems have the moral obligation and social responsibility and the technical skills to lead coalitions that tackle big, complex challenges, including climate change. As a leader in health, hope, and healing, we must do everything we can to protect and preserve the environment that sustains our communities. And then you see under here talking about how on the sustainability journey, Atrium Health has committed to achieve carbon neutrality by 2025. So Atrium Health has also signed with HHS Healthcare Sector Pledge. We've talked extensively about HH Health and the problems there. And with the Biden administration to achieve the climate goals of reducing emissions 50% by 2030. So guys, you can see it. I mean, here it is right here. This is one example, Atrium Health. And then another example that I found too is...
This is a fun one here.
Yeah, I was blown away.
Here's the fun one.
We get liquid vitamins, and these vitamins are like really good. I mean, I can tell you that like since we've been taking them for, I don't know, 6 months now. Yeah. Anyway, so I usually get them online at a different place, but like I decided, okay, let me just get them directly from Mary Ruth. Some of you guys have heard of these liquid vitamins, and bam, I'm just looking around and there it is. There it is. So this is how you can see that we are really, this stuff is here. This stuff is here right now. It's embedded, and people are doing business with the triple bottom line: people, planet, profits. Okay, another example, something that you guys should be aware of. We have a business center that we work in, and we often see the Rotary Club come through. And Rotary Club is also something that is very much involved. They give donations to the WHO each year. And that's just, what you can visibly see on the books. And as you can see right here, Rotary International, I became acutely aware of Rotary International when I was living in Bali and Indonesia. I was taken to several of those meetings, and I just kind of did it because even back then I knew that this was, a group of the elites, if you will, the people that run the community. They get together, it's a social club, and they do business with one another. And yes, indeed, they are in alignment with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And you can see right here, it's just not hard to find. So we wanted to show you some concrete examples of how this integration has happened locally.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, let's see. All right, so just to summarize here a bit, what we've tied together for you is we started off with a stark criticism of the alt media for what for the way they've taken up the practice of the mainstream media at just feeding you things that make you excited, things you want to hear, things that whatever's they can create that's new for the day out of. It's the same story over and over, isn't it? Meanwhile, all of this has been going on the whole time, right behind your back. I've got a little piece here. Do you have anything else prepared for a couple minutes while I get this other? I've got a section here I want to copy into the.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, go.
Well, one of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about, I'll just put a slide up.
Yeah.
One of the points that I wanted to bring forward was what's going on with, like, for example, the Mexican president. So he is coming to the end of his 6-year term, and there's been a new president that's been elected. So her name is Claudia Sheinbaum, and she is the first female president in Mexico. but she does not officially take the office until October 1st. And I just wanted to bring this up because the president that's currently in office, he is, saying, okay, we want to do the North American Union. So he's very much in support of regionalism, and she is as well. Actually, she was the recommended person to come after him. And so he supported her during her election, and he is advocating, for this North American Union, and he can't serve any more than the 6-year term. So he put her in power. So a lot like how the Biden administration is probably being run by Obama, this kind of thing. Yeah. So the current Mexican president is a globalist, and he backed her. And she is a graduate of the World Economic Forum as a young global leader, and she's been a scientist, and she comes from a Jewish family. She's been a vocal advocate for climate change and was mayor of Mexico City for 5 years, leading into running for the presidency. So you can really see this North American Union is just the regionalism and the centralized system and how it's rolling out in stages, and everybody's sort of nodding to the same thing, bowing the knees to the same thing, giving those catchphrases, using that rhetoric that lets you know that it's all coming from the same choir.
Yeah. All right. That's good. Thanks for that. Let's talk a bit about public-private partnerships for a minute, and then we want to talk a little bit about whiteness, because you're going to have to know how to respond to this. You're going to hear this a lot. Okay, let's come back to this. Let's go back to this tab here, where you can see Ibram Kendi X. There you go. Remember, the underlying ideology under regionalism, under what the UN is doing and what the WHO is doing, James Roguski says it. He makes sure to keep bringing it in so you understand what is actually the ideology. And we'll go a little deeper into that here, because our whole point here is cultural apologetics and polemics, and we're going to we're going to break down these worldviews for you so you know what they're all about. The underlying ideology here is a religion, and it's called anti-racism. Now, you would say, let's just consider the term for a minute, anti-racist. Now, like you, surely, I affirm with all my heart that every human being is created in God's image. And therefore, by the core doctrine of my faith, every person has inherent dignity, and we're all equal before God. Now, I'll qualify that because the term anti-racist has become this commonly used term that almost nobody understands what it means. Not like you, I am certainly against racism. Racism is abhorrent. It is sinful. I'm sure you feel the same way. But if somebody asks you, if you're an ally, do you affirm and support anti-racism? What would you say? Of course I do. I'm not a racist. Racism is sinful. I'm not a racist. But that's not what anti-racism means. Anti-racism does not mean that people of all ethnicities should be treated equally as image bearers of God. Anti-racism is distributive justice. Anti-racism means anti-privilege. What is privilege? Again, very subjective, right? You could almost assign it to any particular group or person you wanted. Anti-racism is anti-privilege. Anti-privilege is anti-success. It's anti-prosperity. Again, it's anti-Christian. Working hard and achieving a level of comfort in your life where you don't have to worry day to day where the sustenance is coming from, having a little money in the bank, maybe a retirement plan, having children, having a large family with a big solid support system around you. Yeah, that's a sin in the religion of anti-racism, which is the ideology underlying all of this movement. I'm talking about, you've heard it, right? You've heard people talking about the inclusivity that's in the pandemic treaty, the IHR, the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically mention anti-racism. They specifically mention distributive justice, which is discrimination. Specifically, the term anti-racism is connoted with a disdain for American culture. a hatred for American culture and its systems and its institutions. Right? American culture is inherently evil in the religion of anti-racism. So the anti-racist progressive, progressives are pushing this too. Their argument goes something like, those who are struggling in society are struggling because the system has been explicitly structured to keep them from succeeding. But that's not the first cause of their suffering. You might think the first cause of any suffering in the world would be our fallen nature, right? It would be original sin. Original sin is rebellion against God. Sin is transgression against the law, by definition, by biblical definition, right? It is rebellion against God, of which we are all, 100% of us, guilty. But that's not it. That is not original sin in this particular religion. The first cause of their suffering is indeed an original sin, but it's not rebellion against God. It is the social sin of something they call whiteness, which means privilege, which means what? It means success, prosperity. Whiteness is not a choice someone makes. Whiteness is the original sin in the religion of anti-racism, in the religion of globalism. If that doesn't quite make sense to you, let me clarify. Privilege, that is to say success, prosperity, achievement, working hard, earning your way in this life, is the original sin in the religion of globalism. And let's make it clear, there is no soteriology, there is no doctrine of salvation in that religion, because it's forever paying penance, paying payback, paying retribution. You're never saved. You're always bowing the knee. Let me give you this piece here before we get out of here today. We want to keep this one relatively short if we can. But I want to talk to you for a minute about public-private partnerships. You have to wonder, does anybody in public office know? Does anybody understand what in the world a public-private partnership is? Let me get the... There we go. That'll be better. Public means government. Private means business. It means a capitalistic enterprise. Partnership means a merger in contract law of these two entities. Why would elected officials find public-private partnerships so alluring? Money. Power. The government coffers are operating on a debt. To accommodate all of the spending that they want to do, they engage private business. Right? The citizens have been taxed out. Anybody who comes in saying they're going to raise taxes is not going to get voted in, right? But this is how they do it. Why would businesses find this alluring? Well, businesses want to do it because the taxpayers are taking on the burden for the business. The taxpayers are guaranteeing the profits. Government gets the privilege of choosing which businesses will get this benefit. And you can see how that turns into communism or fascism, where the government is actually controlling the corporations, the economy. So there's no competition. Let's see. I'm reading here from Cheryl Pass. She wrote several articles for the Gaston Gazette, not far from us. And she's done a good job of breaking this down. So I'm going to use her words. People will try to convince you that public-private partnerships are a good idea. They're business-friendly, that this is capitalism. It's good for the country because it's all voluntary. But you know what? You personally didn't volunteer your hard-earned money to risk it in someone else's business venture. But you're still forced to join a partnership contract and bear the risks of it. Now, why is this relevant? Because this is how these well-being economies and governments are implemented right here. Public-private partnerships. The Sustainable Development Goals are all being implemented and have been for 30 years now at the local level in your hometown through public-private partnerships. Okay, what's the big deal? Well, the crux of The fascist movement was corporatism. It's called corporatism, or corporativism is called then. Benito Mussolini co-opted corporations to do the communal government work of society, and it didn't end well. Mussolini was brutally hung in the public square. You might need some more here. Let me tell you, whenever a road needs paving or a road needs to be built, in our area now, they're about to build a huge bridge. I don't even know how. It just looks impossible, but they're going to do it. Who does it? The government doesn't build bridges. Private companies do. So the government will engage in a public-private partnership. Well, typically what happens is businesses bid on the right to do this work. And it's an open bidding process that should be fair. Public-private partnerships are a little different. The government goes out and finds. They favor certain businesses. So you can see how someone who's in government, who owns a business, this is also how it works at the federal level, where you see CEOs going in and out of government. Okay. For example, Obamacare is one giant mega public-private partnership where insurance companies, doctors, and hospitals were forced into a contract with the federal government. And you, as a taxpayer, you were brought into all this through the force of the IRS. You are guaranteeing all of the private medical and pharmaceutical companies who are part of Obamacare. You're guaranteeing their profits through your tax dollars. That's public-private partnership. That's why it's so strong and so huge. That's why prices are out of hand. America's success is in great part due to the free market system, a free market that is being murdered day after day by legislative bodies in Washington, D.C., and in your state capital, and in your local government. The international health regulations and the so-called pandemic treaty and Obamacare, they are Obamacare gone global. See, this is just an extension of all of that. The American medical system is so overpriced, the health insurers and big pharma actually are playing a major role in writing this legislation. And how is it not a sop to large companies to have the government require the citizens to buy your product or else pay large tax penalties? Right? The stock market loves the international health regulations. The stock market loves the pandemic treaty because it's the pharmaceutical industry doing it. And so they know it's a giant business proposal. Pay attention to those kinds of things. The beneficiaries of Obamacare extend beyond the insurers and the pharmaceutical makers. Hospitals who increasingly engage in oligopoly, that is, like, for instance, like most surgeries need to be done in hospitals, right? Well, they come out even stronger because new requirements imposed on doctors' practices make it difficult for a doctor who's retiring. As opposed, he can't sell his business, right? He has to pretty much give it up to the unless you're something like a cosmetic surgeon. There are some doctors who have it a little easier in this system. But they can't sell their businesses to anyone other than one of these regional conglomerates that Summer just showed you, like Atrium. Now, this has been going on for many years. Public-private partnerships are used to develop many things that government wants to foist upon the public, like smart meters, stack and pack apartments, toll roads, on and on. Projects that are far beyond infrastructure, providing water or road access to industries. It's like these that we've been showing you so far. Public-private partnerships cause you to guarantee the risk of someone else's private enterprise. Did you know that? Is that what you expect your tax dollars to do? According to the National Council for Public-Private Partnerships, P3s, PPPs are a contractual agreement between a public agency, federal, state, or local, and a private sector entity. Through this agreement, the skills and assets of each sector, public and private, are shared in delivering a service or facility for the use of the general public. In addition to the sharing of resources, each party shares in the risks and rewards potential in the delivery of the service or facility. Now, from a political perspective, these things are ingenious. Public-private partnerships. Politicians remain in control while convincing the voters that they believe in, democracy, that they believe in the efficiency of a robust private sector. The state escapes the criticism as the public ignorantly clamors for more of this protection from evil-hearted businessmen. To the ruling establishment, public-private partnerships are heads I win, tails you lose. It's that kind of proposition. And what about the private businesses who participate in this scheme? Who are they to ask for and receive your money as a guarantee from elected officials on the profitability of their businesses? Why should you bear the risk of some pharmaceutical industry surviving? How much money do private businesses donate to elect people who then turn around and hand over your money to them? The entire scheme is incestuous and inherently corrupt. This is why the medical, pharmaceutical industry lobby is so huge. Government is supposed to enforce the laws, to keep you safe, to keep the borders closed, to ensure and secure your rights. And that's the only duties of the government, right? It's not one of their duties to do business with private companies like this. So the point here, all this, these public-private partnerships divert your tax money into these programs, into these systems. Let me make it real simple. Your tax money will go to implementing the Sustainable Development Goals in your hometown. Your tax dollars will go to implementing these things you see in the international health regulations and the pandemic treaty. Your tax dollars will go to implementing that at the local level. And not only that, underneath it all is this religious notion of equity, anti-racism. It's unconstitutional and it violates most fundamental tenets of the civil rights legislation. But, right, the fundamental tenet, right, of the nation's benchmark civil rights legislation, the Civil Rights Act, 1964, prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. That's the Civil Rights Act. So what they're building in the name of equity violates the nation's benchmark legislation on civil rights. Socialism and communism promise this more just and equitable society through equity. We've pointed out here to you that's distributive justice. That means some people are discriminated against while some people are preferred. And the redistribution of wealth. Historical and economic evidence demonstrates that these systems result in suffering, economic stagnation, reduced incentives for innovation, increased suffering for the people. On the other hand, Western capitalism, free market economy, grounded in the principles of equal opportunity and the rule of law, has consistently produced higher standards of living through greater innovation and reduced suffering. So what they're trying to build here in the name of making everything equitable will only cause more suffering. Socialism is an economic and political system where the means of production are owned and regulated by the community. Well, this would be the government, really. And wealth is distributed based on whoever needs it. Communism is a little more extreme. It advocates for a classless society in which all property and wealth are communally owned. Equity is a principle of fairness, where resources and legal decisions and opportunities are distributed based on individual needs. Right, so see, it was a bad idea right from the start when more opportunities were being given to one group in society, because that's going to happen again. It's going to be abused. This is distributive justice. the equitable allocation of assets and opportunities within a society by discriminating against those with more. What is Western capitalism? Well, it's the enemy of internationalism. It's an economic system characterized by private property, free markets, minimal state intervention. So I think instead of going into detail here, I think we'll use this piece as an article because it's pretty good. It's got a 4-premise argument for why Western capitalism is good, why Western capitalism leads to it reduces suffering. It increases standard of living, while the system they're proposing does the opposite. It always has. And there's one more point we want to make. Ben Davis wrote an article recently at Cauldron Pool, and it was titled, can we get that one in the description? A link to Ben Davis's article?
Sure.
Sorry, there you go. Your mic is back up now.
You keep putting me on silent.
Yeah, there's an echo.
Okay.
So Ben Davis's article, The Hatred of Whiteness is a Hatred of Christianity. So yeah, let's finish up this way. What's really at stake here? That group that's been singled out that must be exterminated is white Christian capitalism. Let me read what this is from Ben Davis's article. There's no shortage of anti-white rhetoric being thrown about these days. It's mainstream. It's become normalized, and it has come to be expected in movies, television, and even government policies. A recent example of socially acceptable disdain for white people comes from Amanda Stenberg, lead actress in Disney's Star Wars series, The Acolyte. In an interview on The Daily Show, she said the goal of the new series was, quote, to make white people cry, unquote. Which, of course, the audience applauded and laughed at because that's cute and funny. Everything woke fails, so the movie will fail. But the question we should be asking is, what's behind the utter hatred of white? And let's just expand it out, because to be perfectly clear, anti-racism isn't just, it's not anti-white, it's anti-prosperity, it's anti-success. Is the hostility skin deep, or is it something deeper? This anti-whiteism, propagated under the guise of anti-racism, is not just about skin color, because it's not merely the color of skin they find objectionable. What's offensive is what that skin color has come to represent, which is ultimately Christianity. In the minds of many, Christianity and whiteness are inseparable. You saw this, right, from like 2020, during the deconstruction movement, when Christians were leaving the faith and calling the church racist, right? That's because the narrative, the fresh narrative, has been Christianity is racist. The white church is racist. Right? Because white people today are children of the Christian West. As such, predominantly white nations today still experience great blessings, prosperity, and security due to the faithfulness and hard work of those who built before us, even if we are just today running on fumes, even if we have departed from our foundations. It's a general rule that children reap what their fathers sow. This is, people call this sometimes generational curses, but it's just consequences of sin, or consequences of faithfulness, blessings. Remember this always, that what anti-racism ultimately is, it's anti-God's blessing. That's why it's anti-Christian. There are real blessings in obedience. When we're obedient to God's commands, there are blessings there that you experience, you receive in this life. Even material blessings, personal blessings, national blessings, immediate blessings, and blessings that are handed down through generations. This is the promise that God gave Moses in Exodus 26 when he vowed to show steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love him and keep his commandments. So the Western world is evidence of this. That's because God created human societies to work best when they operate in a certain way, under a particular standard, and according to faithfulness. Let's just boil it down. When they're faithful. The closer a society reflects this standard, the better it will function for the good of those who live in it. It's the difference between a society that tolerates theft, that lets prisoners out of prison because of equity, and a society that respects private property in accordance with the 8th commandment. Western nations under the rule of law have spent centuries conforming and reforming societies to best promote justice and freedom, to secure human rights and property rights. The point here is that capitalism can adjust and correct itself, while this socialist, communist, communitarian order that they're creating here will fail, is it can't correct. It can only suck the life out of the people, and eventually that runs out. Much blood has been spilled to protect and preserve those gains that the West has seen, to protect those gains for future generations. It's why nobody has to convince non-Westerners to live in predominantly white countries, right? Here's the thing you can see that's obvious in the world right now that proves this point. Think about migration. Which way does the flow of migration go? It's only ever in one direction. Right? They're coming here. They're coming to Europe. So how did the hatred and self-loathing of, Westerners, how did we start hating ourselves? It arose from this ideology that has infiltrated and now dominates almost every institution. An evil ideology that turns the idea of God's blessings, of blessings from being obedient to God, on its head. It says Western prosperity is not the fruit of righteousness, but the result of sin. I'll repeat that. Anti-racism, wokeism, globalism says that Western prosperity, the reason that you live in a free nation, the reason that you have food today, is not because of the fruit of righteousness. It's not because faithful people established a country and it reverberated down through history. It's because of sin. You have stuff because of sin, is what they say. It says the good the West has known is not due to the gospel working itself out in all of life over a millennium, but it's the product of injustice, oppression, theft, and inequality. The socioeconomic differences between the Westerner and the non-Westerner can essentially be boiled down to this power struggle between the dominant oppressor and the weak whom they oppress. That's the narrative. If the Christian West gained anything, it's because they stole it from somebody else. All wealth and all prosperity is ill-gotten gain in the religion of globalism. Of course, wealth can be acquired through unrighteous means. That's a good qualifier, a good disclaimer here. Let's make it clear. Certainly the wicked do prosper, don't they? We see that. We find out in the wisdom literature, why do the wicked prosper? Proverbs 10:2 talks about this concept. But that's not to say that this is the only way in which good things are secured. To suggest that prosperity doesn't come to the faithful is to say there's no practical difference between obedience to God and disobedience to God, which is, of course, what the secularists say. It's a Marxist mindset that breeds covetousness and envy. Right? This is the totalitarian mindset that Roger Scruton talks about. It's envy and resentment. And that quickly becomes hatred. When coupled with power, this envy-fueled resentment eventually leads to theft through taxes, wealth distribution, property acquisition, and at times even mass murder. This way of thinking This movement, the anti-racists, the globalists, they cannot fathom the idea that God rewards good behavior or that disobedience to God's commands brings ruin. They have to save the earth. It should go without saying, but a sure way to ruin your own marriage, to destroy your family, and to forfeit half of what you own is to violate the seventh commandment, prohibiting adultery, Exodus 20:14. Apply that to the nation. As many of us do, we tend to expect the benefits of obedience without the obedience itself. But when we expect to reap where we did not sow, envy quickly turns to hatred. Exodus 20:17. So, we're susceptible to this mindset too. This is why vigilance is required. Nathaniel Vincent said, quote, "How much of hell is there in the temper of an envious man? The happiness of another is his misery. The good of another is his affliction. He looks upon the virtue of another with an evil eye and is as sorry at the praise of another as if the praise were taken away from himself. Envy makes a hater of his neighbor and his own tormentor." Unquote. Of course, they'll tell us their resentment is about these historical injustices. And yet today, they have nothing at all to say about the fact that there are more than 9 million men, women, and children living in modern slavery throughout Africa right now. Is slavery only an issue when white people are involved? Is a question to ask. It doesn't matter how many studies prove that predominantly white nations are the least racist countries on earth. It's just a fact. The narrative that white people are all racist is persistent nonetheless. It doesn't matter how many non-white nations are still currently practicing slavery. The preoccupation with it and the preoccupation with these historical sins continues. In reality, they don't insist on calling all white people racists. Again, it's not necessarily about being white. It's about this subjective idea of privilege. But they don't call it anti-racism because they care about ending racism. They call white people racist so Westerners will be too scared to resist their anti-Western and anti-Christian agenda. That's what's happening. So this hatred of prosperity, this hatred of Westernism, this hatred of whiteness is a hatred of Christianity. But what the Western world fails to understand is that while blessings of God come from faithfulness to God, those blessings are forfeited when we're unfaithful to God. Now here is the most important point of this article. When those blessings are forfeited, God promises to hand those blessings to those who didn't sow the fields or plant the vineyards. Pay close attention to this. This is the most important point of the whole presentation today. God warned the Israelites in Deuteronomy 28, 43 and 47 of what would happen to them if they were unfaithful to Him. Quote, "The sojourner who is among you shall rise higher and higher above you, and you shall come down lower and lower, because you did not serve the Lord your God with joyfulness and gladness of heart." How about that? The militant de-Christianization of the West promised freedom. Communism always promises freedom, but it gave us slavery. It could deliver nothing else. If we want to return to the freedom and prosperity that the West once knew, then we have to return to the Christianity out of which that freedom and prosperity grew and flourished. At this point, there's only one possible way forward for the Western world. And it is not bending the knee to the anti-racist, pro-Palestinian marching mobs. Nothing against Palestine. We're not, there's no side to choose there. But the way forward is not kneeling down to those who scream at us. It's not in bowing to their demands to forfeit what we've been given, what we've earned, and what we've been given from God, what we've earned in that blessing from God. It's not in erasing our history. It's not in dishonoring our ancestors. When you're heading in the wrong direction, the only way forward is backwards. The only way forward is repentance. The Lord said, quote, "If my people who are called by my name humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sins and heal their land." Lost video there. So. Okay, well, it's the camera. Okay, it's the camera. So I'll finish up here then, I think. All right, well, that's a good place to end anyway, isn't it? Well, just to finish up here, the envy of Marx expects to reap good where it did not sow, and today in the Western world is no different. We're no longer sowing good, so why should we expect to reap a good harvest? So there needs to be an about face. That means repentance. There needs to be an acknowledgement of sins, personal sins and national sins. There needs to be repenting of those sins. There needs to be a turning, a seeking of Christ in prayer and in humility. Not to the hurt of our neighbors or even the foreigner, but to their good. Bless and do not curse. And if you cannot pray to the Lord to bless your enemies, then you don't have the blessing of the Lord resting on you. That's tough. But the Western world is blessed. And when we're blessed, then the Western world can truly be a blessing to the rest of the world. So we have to believe that God wants our good and that our good is found by acknowledging Him and by living within the bounds of the commands of Christ the King. Until then, you can expect to sink down lower and lower in our homelands. So above all, repent and seek the Lord while you still can.
The hammer comes down and beats you over the head for the rest of your life with a big national security stick. And so that people learn to duck their head and not speak up. Because, bad idea now.
This is the emergency broadcast system. This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test. Citizens are advised to take the following steps.
Find us, armoroftruth.net.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
Faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel.
This is not a test. Repeat, this is not a test.